Hi guys, and welcome to another batch of mini reviews. If you're new to this series, this is where I essentially review 7 films in the time that it would normally take me to review just one. So ultra quick reviews here. We've got 6 horror films today and 1 sci-fi. I've sneaked a sci-fi in there. I'm going to take these in the exact order in which I watched them, and I'll give a score for each film as I'm going along, and then we can all go home, and that'll be nice, won't it? So let's jump into it. We'll start with this film. So first up we have Downrange. This is about a group of youngsters who are carpooling. There's 7 of them, I think, all heading in the same general direction, all squeezed into this one family-sized car like sardines. But on a deserted road, one of the tyres gets shot out by a sniper who is somewhere in the surrounding wilderness. And these characters are all trapped on this one stretch of road. They're all hiding behind the car. They're, using the grass to hide in, or whatever trees there are. They realise eventually what's going on, and they can't really go anywhere. There's no phone signal that they can use. They're just kind of at the mercy of this sniper, and they don't even know where he is on the landscape. So very simple concept. It is a singular location horror film. We spend pretty much the entirety of this film in this one place. It is a little bit slow moving at times. It reminds me of one of the shorts that was in the most recent VHS film, because there was a sniper attacking a bunch of people on a boat. And actually I think this story possibly works better in the shorter format. I mean, the biggest problem you might have with this film is just the fact that it doesn't really go anywhere for the longest time. That there's a lot of time spent with characters just mulling around, wondering what the hell they can do. And the sniper is more than happy to take his time with these victims. He's in no rush, and seemingly he has a never-ending supply of bullets as well. I definitely noticed that in this film. But it's quite original. I can't remember seeing a film like it. There's nothing in this that I found particularly inspirational. But at the same time, there's nothing about it that offended me. It's a fine midweek thriller, I guess, and I'm going to give it 3 out of 5. Next up, we have Horror in the High Desert 3, Firewatch. Now, if you watch all of these mini-review videos, you might remember that in the previous episode, I reviewed Horror in the High Desert 1 and 2, and actually Part 2 was my film of the video. Well, I can now announce that this series has done it again, because Part 3 is my official film of this video. Yep, it's another great installment. If you don't know what this series is, it's basically found footage horror where various characters end up stranded in the wilderness of Arizona, and there's something lurking out there, either a serial killer or something supernatural. We don't actually know, even after 3 films. That's the beauty of this franchise. You never really find out what's doing the stalking and the killing, and maybe one day we will get one of these films where the secrets are revealed, but I'm dreading that moment, because I think it will seriously reduce the effectiveness of what this franchise is. This whole business is... It's like what Blair Witch could have become if it had become a long-running franchise. I mean a proper, well-thought-out franchise, not just doing a reboot every now and again and the occasional meta installment. A proper franchise. But this series at the moment seems like it's being properly planned out. All the films have been subtly connected here and there, and it just gives off the feeling like the writer director knows what he's doing. And there's going to be more installments in the future. We will definitely be getting at least a Part 4, I believe, albeit probably not for a year or 2. But I was really impressed by this one. I still think Part 2 is my favourite, but I like the new main character that you get in this one. He's got mental health problems. He's come up from Mexico, and him going after this legend, it's giving his life some purpose. I just found that I was really able to get behind him as he goes on this search to find out what happened to the people in the first 2 movies. Some good use of railways and railway tracks in this one. There is a strong hint that the evil is supernatural in this 3rd installment, way more than in the previous 2. And I'm kind of hoping that rather than this being a complete change of pace for the whole thing. I sort of hope that this series will be covering different horrors from around the state, and all of this isn't just caused by one person or one thing. I think it would be more interesting if we get different horrors covering all of these films. That would be more fascinating to me, but we'll see how it goes in the future. But for now, we're 3 for 3 in this series. It's one of my favourite new franchises of 2024, and as for my score, I'm going to give it 4 out of 5. Next up, we have Truth or Dare. This is about a group of youngsters who go to Mexico for spring break, and to cut a long story short, by the time they go back to America, they've all picked up this curse. It's the Truth or Dare curse, I guess, to give it a name. So there's like a demonic entity who wants them to keep playing this game until they're all dead. So what will happen is, there'll be a character going about his or her daily business at college or whatever, and then the entity will take over the body of someone near to the character, and they will say to the character, truth or dare. And then at that point, they've got 2 options, truth or dare. Oh, by the way, if they refuse to play, they will basically die. Now, if they choose dare, they will have to take on some really dangerous challenge, like walking along the edge of a really tall building or something. If they choose truth, they will have to reveal some deep, dark secret to their friends, like maybe they've been sleeping with somebody's boyfriend or something, and this can obviously cause great stress to the group and possibly violence. So both options are fraught with danger. That there is this additional rule that says you can't pick truth more than twice in a row, which I guess is there to make sure that the characters don't survive the movie just by telling each other truths, if you see what I mean. I was actually enjoying this film for most of it. I mean, it's a trashy little thing, but it's good fun. It's like a combination of Final Destination and Countdown, that type of thing. You know, you've got like an invisible entity, a Grim Reaper type thing that's impossible to reason with or kill, and it's laser focused on eventually killing off a specific group of characters. It does get a little bit messy towards the end, that there's way too many late game rule changes and revelations in this one. Too much has been squeezed into the last act. I think if this had just stayed fairly simple all the way through, I think I would have given it an even higher score than what I'm going to, but I'll still give it 3 out of 5. I did get a kick out of it, and you know what, I'd watch another one of these. I don't know if there's any plans to do a sequel, but I'd certainly watch another one, although I'd probably rather have another Final Destination film. Next up, we have Train. Now, I'm pretty sure that I put this film on quite a few years ago, but I only got to around about the 20 or 30 minute mark. Probably I was too tired or drunk or whatever, and the following day I just never went back to it. But if you've known me a while, you'll know that I love my train-themed horror movies, so it's probably inevitable that I would return to this eventually. This is about an American judo team who are on a tour of Europe, and at the start of the story they've just finished a tournament in Germany maybe, but their next tournament is definitely in the Ukraine. This is obviously before the recent horrors in the Ukraine. But in order to get to this next city, Odessa, I think, they've got to take a train, but some of the team get on the wrong train, and this is not where they want to be because it's basically a criminal train. And I don't think what I'm going to say next constitutes a particularly big spoiler, because it was fairly obvious to me from a very early stage of this movie what was going on. So it's basically like a body part trafficking gang. So what these criminals are doing, they're kidnapping and killing foreigners who get on this one train and cutting them up for body parts and selling them on the black market sort of thing. And they've got this carriage at the back of the train that's like the butcher room. That's where they tie people down and start cutting them up and stuff while they're still alive as well. It's really nasty. This film, though, it's way too focused on pain and suffering and torture, and not enough on atmosphere and thrills. I think the trouble is this came out back in the days when Saw was still a really big thing and releasing a new film every year, and Hostel was still a very well-known horror film of the time. You know, I don't want to use the term torture porn, but in the noughties, there was a lot of emphasis on torture and suffering in horror. It was a decade where the gloves were off. There was no more censorship like there still sort of was in the 90s. You know, the genie was out of the bottle for horror, and there were films like this that just, tailgating films like Saw and Hostel. And it's very much to this film's detriment watching it now. I mean, by the halfway point of this, I just felt desensitized to all the violence and suffering, and I just found myself craving something a bit more like Jamie Lee Curtis's Terror Train, which is full of atmosphere and interesting lighting, and it's less focused on fancy kills and having gore splattered all over the train. I will say, though, that at the end of this, there is one of the best final deaths for a villain I've ever seen. It's really cool. I just wanted to give a round of applause. But overall, it's a misguided film in so many ways. I still kind of liked it. But another problem with it is the casting of the final girl. So Thora Birch is playing the main girl who makes it pretty much to the end. But she's too slight for this role. I mean, she's a pocket rocket, and it's implied that she's able, because of her judo training, to take down loads of like really heavy set Eastern European men, but it looks ridiculous on screen. They needed to cast somebody a bit more like that girl from Terminator Dark Fate, maybe. Somebody I could believe could potentially throw a few men around, but Thora Birch doing it just looks utterly stupid. But I'm still going to give this film 3 out of 5. We're getting a lot of 3s today. I still sort of enjoyed this film. Maybe it's just my natural love of trains, which is getting this film off the hook a little bit for me. But hook is a good word to use because there's too many people on hooks suffering in this movie. Like I said, it's a bit of a missed opportunity, this one. Next up, we have The Bellkeeper. This is also our stinker of the week, but I might have predicted that because out of the 7 films today, this is the one I had heard of the least. It stars a guy called Randy Couture. I'm not sure if I've got that name right or not. I think he might be an ex-wrestler turned actor. I've barely heard of him. I don't know where I've seen him before. I've seen him somewhere, though, I'm sure of it. Well, he's playing a ghostly spectre of a man in this, the Bellkeeper, essentially. So, to begin with, we've got a group of youngsters heading to a small hamlet somewhere. Have you noticed there are so many of these film reviews that just begin with, so we've got a group of youngsters who are going somewhere, they're horny and stupid, and it's the same here. These youngsters are extremely silly to a man and a girl, and they get into all sorts of trouble with this really dangerous spirit because they completely ignore the warnings of the locals and bash this bell, which then makes the Bellkeeper turn up, and it really is as dumb as it sounds. It's just not a very good film. It does have one game-changing moment like halfway through, which I thought was quite clever, but it wasn't enough to save it, and I just felt myself becoming more and more disinterested as it went on. It also feels decidedly young adult in its tone. It's the sort of horror film that you might put on at a 12-year-old's birthday party, and all the kids will find it really scary, but the adults will just think, oh God, it's not good, is it? But you know what, it was just one of those films that I decided to give a chance to. I like to do that from time to time. I don't just put on films that have a reputation. You know, sometimes you'll put on a random film like this and it will turn out to be brilliant. It's like going into a mine and digging down and just striking gold, and I'll think, wow, a gold nugget. I can't wait to turn the camera on and talk about this thing that I've discovered. But on this occasion, all I found when I dug down was dried up rabbit poo. 1.5 out of 5. Next up, we have the one non-horror film in today's video, Zack Snyder's much criticised epic space opera that he's been cultivating on Netflix, Rebel Moon. Now, I must admit, I have been growing a little bit tired of all the criticism that Rebel Moon has been getting online over the past few months, but I deliberately ignored the first version when it came out because I knew that it was a watered down, shorter version of the film that we would eventually get, this new version that's only just been released by Netflix. And I think most people probably should have done the same as me, in all honesty, because why bother watching 60% of a movie when you can eventually get the full movie? That's the way I see it anyway. And the advantage of being able to watch this new cut without having seen the previous one is that I wasn't influenced by how bad that version is. I could just watch this thing completely afresh, and I had a really good time with it. I've got to say, I watched the whole thing in one night, all 3 hours and 21 minutes. It is a bit derivative. It's essentially Star Wars, but slightly more adult, if that floats your boat. I mean, you've got an evil empire, you've got a small band of rebels in a small village. It does feel very much like Star Wars, but darker. But it stands up well to most Star Wars films, I'd say. If I was going to do a Star Wars ranking tomorrow and put Rebel Moon into it for whatever reason, I'd probably put it like halfway up. It's that good, I'd say. But at the same time, it didn't blow my socks off. It's not like amazing. You know, I'm going to give it 3.5 out of 5. I don't regret watching it. I did really enjoy it, and certainly by the end I was very satisfied that all the criticism it's been getting is absolutely ridiculous. I'll certainly be up for more episodes of this. I shouldn't call them episodes. I mean, there is one more film I can already watch. There is a part 2 that's out. I might need a little bit of a break before the next one. I might try and watch it in time for when I do my next mini reviews video, but these are long films in the cuts that are being released now, so I'm not keen on watching them night after night or anything like that. But I enjoyed Rebel Moon. I'm gonna put it out there. It's not destined to become one of my favourite franchises, certainly, but for now at least, I'm happy to keep following it. Finally today we have No Way Up. So this is a fairly recent shark horror film. It's got a great concept. So we've got a bunch of people on a plane, a commercial aircraft. I forget where it's going, but it crashes into the ocean and sinks to about 100 yards or so beneath the waves. It lands on this like rocky outcrop near to an abyss. It's not that far down, and yet it's probably too far down to comfortably swim up to the surface. It's an annoying sort of distance beneath the waves. But because the plane comes to rest on a kind of slant, it allows an air pocket to exist in the back half of the plane. So these characters who survive the initial crash, and there's only about 7 of them who survived the crash, they're able to survive for a while in this air pocket. It's a very claustrophobic little space. It's not very big. It's like half the size of a standard living room, maybe. And they've got to try and figure out how they're going to get out of this awful situation. And the movie is quite terrifying, really, mainly because it just feels so real. I mean, I could smell the inside of the fuselage watching this film. I could smell the fear on these characters, because I found it very easy to put myself in these shoes. Like, I go abroad sometimes in planes that will be going over the ocean, and conceivably, therefore, I could end up like these people. You know, I could end up on a plane that goes down and then sinks a little bit beneath the ocean, and therefore I could end up stuck in a compartment that's running out of air. That could happen to me, potentially, whereas most other shark films, they couldn't happen to me because they usually involve scuba divers or water sports enthusiasts, you know, people who get themselves into predicaments that could never happen to me because I never go cage diving. I never go swimming in caves filled with blind sharks or whatever. But in this film, I found it very easy to put myself in the shoes of these people, and it made me feel very uneasy, actually, when I was watching the thing. I was just very on edge. It is kind of boring at times. We spend a lot of time with the characters not doing an awful lot. It is the drawback of singular location horror films. You always get this, but I really enjoyed it for the most part. The characters are very likeable. I really found myself rooting for these people. I mean, Colin Meaney, is it Meaney or Mimi? He's in this film. Brilliant actor. Definitely recommend you give this one a watch. I'm going to give it 3.5 out of 5, and I would have given it more just for the fact that I think a lot of people will find their patience being tested with just how much time we spend in this one little pocket of the plane. But I'm not sure how I would have written it any differently, to be honest, if I was doing the movie. It's just something that you have to put up with with films like this. So I actually forgot to wrap up just now when I was talking about No Way Up. So I've had to set the camera back up again just to say my goodbyes. So thanks for joining me for 7 more mini reviews. Just to sum up what we've been talking about, please check out the Horror in the High Desert franchise if you haven't already. 3 great films now in that series. And the film to definitely avoid out of these is The Bellkeeper. But aside from that, I will bid you a very pleasant evening and cheerio.